When you sign into Netdata from the Netdata login page, which is app.netdata.cloud, this is the screen that's most likely going to greet you. And you can select what operating system you're running to install your first Netdata agent. And then agent is the open source component that you install on your system. So in case you're running Linux, for example, you would click on this and you would copy this, what we call this kickstart command. What it does is it downloads the latest Netdata agent, it installs it on your server, on your VM, on your system, and then it connects it to your space in Netdata Cloud. So all you have to do is just copy this command, paste it. The whole process takes around a minute or two. Once you do this, then you would arrive at a page that looks like this, right? So this is your Netdata home screen. I am using a space here which already has a bunch of nodes that are connected to it. So you can see that there's a total of 48 nodes. Only 12 of them are live right now. The majority are offline, and there are a few stale nodes. And by stale, we mean that there is data for it to be queried and visualized on a chart, but right now it's not connected to Netdata Cloud, which means it's not completely offline because there's some data that's still available at another node for this node. You have this node map view here on top, which just quickly shows you which nodes are online and which nodes are offline. And you can mouse over to learn more about these nodes, including the name of the node, what operating system it's running, what are the resources, are they connected to any other Netdata agents in our distributed architecture. And you can choose to group by different things if you wish to. You can color by things like connection stability, for example, to understand. You can see that majority of my Amazon nodes are unstable, and maybe this is something that I want to look into at a later point in time. We also have information around what kind of nodes these are, which ones are Netdata parents, which are mini centralization points, and which are Netdata children, which are just regular Netdata agents. You have some high-level information below about what are the alerts that have been happening over the last 24 hours, which nodes have had the most alerts in the last 24 hours. In this case, it's just this one node. And also how many metrics are available across the infrastructure, how many charts those metrics are being visualized in, and how many alerts are currently configured. So this is just a high-level view to get you started. If you go on, the next tab talks about the different nodes that you have. So all of those nodes that we saw earlier, you get a more detailed view of them. It shows you a quick snapshot of the high-level metrics. So in this case, you can see CPU, TCP connection abort, system load, and so on. And you can customize this. You can choose what metrics show up here or not. But again, this is just intended as a quick preview into your nodes.
Yeah, one thing that will be interesting to our users will be that you can open a single node dashboard right from here by just clicking on the host, and this will give you all the metrics, all the logs, all the functions that are associated with this node. So if you had a team that already is aware of a problem on a specific host, you can open a single node dashboard and don't necessarily need to go into the aggregated dashboards. That gives you an end-to-end view. So as you can see in here on the single node dashboard, the default is the metrics tab. It shows you all the metrics that we collect from that host, but also we have logs. All the logs that are in the systemd journal are automatically visualized in here, but also top, which is the list of functions that you can execute without logging into the terminal of the host. For example, this is the K8s Tab and so on. But yes, this is a granular view of your infrastructure if you already know where is it that you want to look at for monitoring or troubleshooting.
The main tab where users will spend most of their time is called the Metrics tab or the Metrics Explorer. This tab will by default show you an infrastructure-wide view. So it's a multi-node dashboard. All of the charts that you see here are being populated from across all of the nodes in this infrastructure. So by default, it's using all of the nodes. You can of course filter and choose the nodes that you're interested in, and it will filter by that. And you can see that Netdata automatically, what it does is it organizes all of the metrics into what we call the table of contents. So there's system level metrics underneath which you have compute, memory, storage. And if you click on any of these, compute for example, you can see that the metrics are further subcategorized under sections called CPU, PSI, and then under each sections you could have even more subsections, load for example. entropy. So this is an easy way. We call this the table of contents because it's an easy way to really dig into the specific part of the infrastructure that you're interested in. So you have compute, memory, storage, network, all of the things that you would expect at a high level from your infrastructure. You also have hardware level metrics, and depending on the kind of sensors and stuff that you have installed, you could be looking into fan speed and temperature, humidity, and all those kinds of things. And then you have metrics. For example, here you have Kubernetes related metrics because there is a Kubernetes cluster that's running here. You could have synthetic checks like HTTP checks, certificate checks, ping tests, and so on. And then you have all of the application related metrics. So Netdata will always try to automatically discover the applications that are running in your infrastructure. It can do this for most applications, but for some applications, you would need to enable some very basic configuration so that it shows up here. And you get what can be thought of as a dashboard per each application, right? So if I've clicked Postgres here, you can see this is my Postgres dashboard, right? And these are the summary charts, what we call kind of a snapshot view, which is what each section starts with. But then underneath it, you have the time series charts for every single metric. In the case of Postgres, I think we collect more than 100 metrics. Let's dig in a little bit into the time series charts and what it can do. So if I look at this particular chart, for example, this is the connections state count in Postgres. So it's showing the Postgres connections, how many of them are active, idle, and idle in transaction. And this is a real-time chart. So by default, it's going to update every second in real time. There's quite a lot of information here. So it's important to take some time to understand it properly. You can see that on the top of this chart, there's this slight purple coloration here on the top. We call this area of the chart the anomaly ribbon. And what this coloring means is that Netdata has detected that there's some anomalous behavior that's happening right over here, right? So this spike that you see in the number of active connections is anomalous behavior. It's not an expected spike. It's not something that the system has experienced in the last week or the last couple of weeks, for example. So this is clearly, there's something going on here that's not normal for the system. And it's quite easy to kind of see this because of the anomaly ribbon. There's also a lot of slicing and dicing that you can do on this chart. You can decide what to group by. So in this case, the default was dimension, but you could group by the Postgres server, by the node, by a variety of other things. And you can have custom labels here as well if you want to group by those things. You can aggregate by different things. Netdata is a very opinionated observability solution in a good way. We try to learn from subject matter experts, from the community, and try to put in all of that knowledge into the tool. So we're already doing the work to understand what is the right way to aggregate a particular metric. So we believe that aggregating by sum is the best way to visualize this metric. But if you wish to change it to something else, you can do it from the chart. You can save these settings as well by clicking on this save icon. You can filter by the nodes or the instances or the dimensions. And like I mentioned earlier, you can have custom labels. So these are just the default labels that Netdata comes with, but you can have any number of labels here depending on your workloads, teams, organization, or anything else really. And then the last one here is the time aggregation. So this is about how you want to aggregate across time when you're trying to visualize this information. And the default is usually one of these things, but there's a variety of different ways which you can do this. If you want to get really fancy, you have standard deviation, coefficient of variation, and all these different things. And coming back to the chart, if you want to see if there are any alerts active for this chart, you would see on this bell icon, there would be a coloration in either red or amber that indicates there's an active alert. In this case, there's nothing. So there's clearly no active alerts. If you click on it, you can see that there's no alerts configured either. If you want to create an alert for this chart, you can just click on this button here and you would be able to create a new alert. Information icon just talks about any information about this chart. This icon here is defining what chart type is used. So this is a stacked chart, but you can choose to change it to a line chart or a stacked bar chart or any chart of your choosing. You can make this full screen. You can save the settings that you've done so far. And these 6 dots at the end here, this is if you want to drag and drop this into a custom dashboard. So all you need to do to create custom dashboard is drag and drop in Netdata. So I would just grab this here, just pull this over to the dashboard section, and I can either drop it into one of these existing custom dashboards or I can create a new custom dashboard by just dropping it there. That's it, right? So a new custom dashboard has been created. I can go there, I can edit it, I can rename it, I can change the chart style, group it, resize it, do all of those things. And then there's also capability that you see when you enter the chart area. This is invisible by default, but when you get into the chart, you see that there's options here to pan, highlight, select and zoom, and then zoom in, zoom out, and reset. So pan is obviously just to pan through the chart. Highlight is something that's used if you want to highlight a particular area in the timeline and really try to get more insights about what's happening here, right? So once you highlight an area, you can actually run metrics correlation. You can run anomaly advisor on this area. We'll talk about this in a little bit on how exactly this works. You can also just select a particular area and zoom into it, and then zoom out, zoom in, and reset are kind of obvious here. So this is the capability that you have in each and every chart inside Netdata. And like we talked about earlier, there's all kinds of things that Netdata is monitoring here, including itself. So any Netdata specific metrics are available here. So all of this was the Metrics Explorer.
I think the one thing that we could add is you can filter on a specific dimension by just clicking on the dimension at the bottom of the chart. So if you, in this case, if you only want to look at what are the idle connections on your Postgres, you just click on it. And if you click on it again, it will enable all of them, or you can choose a different. There is definitely a bunch of slicing and dicing options that are available on every single chart.
The next section that we want to talk about is called Top. So this is where you can see all the Netdata functions there, and functions can be thought of as a way for Netdata to run commands on your infrastructure that can fetch information that's real-time in nature, but it's not in the form of a time series of metrics. It's not in the form of logs or events, but it's information nevertheless. So in this case, for example, we are seeing what you could think of as the output of the top command, for example, on a Linux machine. It's giving you the list of processes, the list of PIDs, and what are their resource utilization in terms of CPU, memory, writes, disk, so on. And this is again real-time information, so it's gonna keep updating in real time. You can choose to pause to drill down further, and this is just one of these functions, right? And it's called processes, but there's a whole variety of different functions. You can dig into things like block devices, information about any of the containers that are running in your system. There's also network related information. So network connections is an interesting function where you can see what are all the open network connections across what kind of sockets, how many sockets are open across, client side, server side, public, private, and then really it kind of helps you visualize what's happening in your network. And we keep adding new functions to this list. So as a user, you should expect that you would see a lot more functionality in this area in the future.
And you can also add your own custom functions using standard plugins, which can be exposed on your dashboard. This is a functionality that would also be interesting if you have specific commands or functions that you would like to run on your devices.
The next section is logs. So the logs, this is a logs viewer for any kind of log that exists in your Linux system, which is stored in systemd journal. So Netdata relies on systemd journal as the default log storage mechanism on Linux-based machines. And journal is something that exists on most Linux distributions. Let me see if there's, okay. So in this case, you can see that there's 3.9. So the logs tab is really a logs explorer or a logs visualizer, and it allows you to monitor and visualize logs that are stored in your system. In the case of Linux based systems, it's logs, any kind of logs that are stored in systemd journal. And in the case of Windows systems, it's any of your Windows event logs. So here you can see that visualizing the logs from this particular node here, there's around 4 GB of logs, but it's really snappy in terms of how quickly the logs can be filtered. And if I want to search for something specific, let's say error, you can see that it was really fast to filter on any log lines that included the keyword error. So it makes it a lot easier for you to just quickly visualize your logs, filter, and you can of course customize it by what facets you want to see. And there's also this nice histogram view on top of the logs. So if you want to see if there were spikes in errors or warnings or info or notice, it's really easy to see. And this is just for this particular kind of log. If it was a different kind of log, of course it would be different facets that would be involved. So we have on the right here a whole set of different using filters. This is the nodes section where you can filter by different nodes. Let me try clicking on another node just to show what I mean. So we're now looking at the logs from a different node. You can also choose the source of the logs if you want to see all the logs, all the local system logs, or local logs. And then you have specific fields within the logs that you can filter by. And these things, a lot of these things are automatically populated here. So it's easy for you to see. For example, here, if you want to see any logs related to just the Amazon SSM agent, you can see that happening here. And there's more options to filter. So you can filter by the priority of the logs, the syslog facility, the different facets that you want to use here. So if I want to increase this by adding the code function, the code line, those facets would also get added to the logs here. And you can have, you can mix and match the filters as well. So if you want different kinds of filters, you can do that. You can also download this information as a CSV if you want to share it quickly outside of Netdata with your team. Let's move on to the next tab, which is the Kubernetes tab.
So Netdata can be used to monitor any of your Kubernetes clusters. It's as simple as copying a Helm install command and installing Netdata across your Kubernetes cluster. So we install the Netdata agent on each of your worker nodes. So we get the visibility to your resource level metrics, but also to your container and pod level metrics. As you can see, the top of the screen provides you a summary of how your Kubernetes cluster is currently behaving. But also we have a map of all of your containers and your pods, which shows you per namespace how you've deployed applications on your Kubernetes cluster, and also more details on each of these pods. The shading of the blue kind of indicates the utilization, and you can slice and dice this. For example, this chart is currently grouped by the Kubernetes C group CPU, but you can change this to whatever you like. And you have similar maps for every single section, whether it's CPU, whether it's memory, whether it's disk or network, you have similar such maps. The charts in themselves are exactly similar to what we saw on the Metrics Explorer. Each chart comes with a myriad of options for you to slice and dice. So if you wanted to look at a specific container or a specific pod on how it's behaving on a certain aspect, whether it's to do with resource or anything else, you can do that. We also attach most of these facets on your Kubernetes cluster with labels. So if you look at the labels drop down on any of your sections, on any of your charts, maybe it's better to look at the CPU section. So if you look at it, there are about 1300 odd labels, and you now have the ability to kind of slice and dice this chart of yours based on a Kubernetes namespace, a Kubernetes worker node name, a pod name, or anything of your choice. This is extremely powerful in the way it has been built, and all of these are just automatically collected. There is not a single line of configuration that is needed to collect anything that is shown on the data dashboard. What is also important to note is that most of the alerts on a Kubernetes cluster are also shipped out of the box. So whether it is to do with a CPU limit, a memory limit, or any of those parameters, there's usually a Netdata alert that is automatically shipped. So you won't need to create this on day zero. Of course, you can customize it for your own needs. We also have the cluster state, which gives you the cluster level information apart from just the container view. The cluster state now is telling you what's the situation at the Kubernetes cluster level. Of course, here you also have sub-level details on nodes, on pods, on containers, and the various discovery aspects. So Kubernetes monitoring is quite comprehensive in that we provide you container level details, cluster level details, and in case you have the kubelet or kubeproxy enabled, we also gather those metrics out of the box.
So we're going to be talking about a few different sections here. The first one is just custom dashboards. So like I mentioned earlier, the Netdata philosophy is that you shouldn't need custom dashboards, but of course, if you want to create them, you can. And like I showed earlier, you can just drag and drop dashboards here, or you can create manually from here as well. You can see that some sample dashboards here. So this is a Postgres dashboard, and you can choose to change the chart in any form that you like, and you can arrange it, organize it in any which way, and then you can add text that explains some of this, and you can save the chart as well. So the custom dashboard is really easy to use.
Yeah, I think if you can go into one of the custom dashboards, one of the use cases that comes up with most of our customers is, given that all of our charts are aggregated by default. Is there a way for me to monitor this at a per instance level or a per host level? That is where this becomes very useful. You can have the same chart or the same context filtered by different facets. So it could be a node, a label, or whatever else, and you can duplicate the same chart. And what that does is you can potentially have a single dashboard that gives you the same chart for different instances put next to each other. I think that's one of the key use cases that many of our customers use this for. And you can also, for example, have the same chart in a summary view as shown here as a gauge, or you can have it as a standard time series view. And all of these possibilities make custom dashboards pretty powerful, in the sense that the teams that are generally looking at monitoring and troubleshooting can have a custom dashboard, which could be their entry point to looking at the state of the system. And then they can, of course, dig deeper into the metrics explorer and take a look at what's happening in your infrastructure.
So that was custom dashboards. Now let's go to the alerts tab.
Yeah, Netdata ships alerts out of the box. We have about 300 alerts that are built in for operating system level metrics, for hardware level metrics, application level metrics, and all of them are just available when you install the Netdata agent. So when you install Netdata, you might already start seeing some alerts to show you that something may potentially be worth looking at in your infrastructure. On this tab, as you can see, we have two sections. One is for the raised alerts. So this is showing you all the active alerts. We have 3 severity states: warning, critical, and clear. What you will see in here is any alert that is in the critical or warning state. Every alert comes with its definition and information on what it is about. As you can see, maybe for this QoS packet drops alert, it shows you what is the context. So it is TC QoS drop. That's the chart from where the alert is brought in. It shows you the specific instance, the node where the alert was seen, but also additional details of when was the alert triggered, what is the latest value. So is it on a recovering trend or is it on a failure trend? And it also gives you a quick view of the configuration. So if you go to the bottom of this alert model, you see that there is an edit alert or a visit documentation for you to see more details on how this alert has been configured. Right? So this is basically how the alert has been configured, and it's showing you the actual configuration. I think we'll come to the alert configuration manager in a little bit. So you get a lot of information about what's happening with these alerts, but you can edit the alert, silence the alert, or even look at more details about the alert right from this view. So if you click on the Netdata Assistant, it gives you more information about the alert for you to understand the alert. What does this actually mean? How do you troubleshoot this alert? And some useful resources that you can potentially look at. So when an alert is triggered and you're in a potential outage situation, the last thing you want is to be looking at 100 places trying to figure out how to troubleshoot a problem. Netdata brings in all of the expertise and the information available right into your dashboard. This is extremely crucial when it comes to mean resolution and how quickly you can troubleshoot any potential outages. Now, the second part of this alerts tab is the running alerts. It shows you every alert that has been configured and are currently running. These could be out of the box alerts, which Netdata ships, but also custom alerts that you could have configured. And this gives you a full room level view. So every room has a set of hosts, and this is now currently showing you the alerts that are associated with these hosts. It's giving you a room level information on how many hosts or how many nodes on this room have this alert enabled. What is the current state? Are there any critical or warning instances of this alert? And how many of them are in clear instance? You can dig deep further into the specific alert definition on a per node level or even the alert instance level. So if you click on one of the lines in here, it basically takes you to the next level. This is all the nodes that have this alert configured. But then you can also dig further deep in case there are multiple instances of the same alert on the same node. You will also see this. So currently on this Netdata Collector 0 node, you have multiple instances of this alert, and each of them, maybe in this case, it's an HTTP check. So different HTTP checks that you have configured have the same alert associated with them, but each of them is basically an alert instance. And from here, you can see which is the specific instance of the alert that is in a critical condition or a warning condition. So this helps you to drill down very easily from a room level, so a set of hosts, what are the alerts configured, to a node level, so which are the nodes that have this alert configured, and then finally to the instance level to show you which are the instances that this alert is applicable to. Yes, so this is the alerts tab, but the most important aspect is about configuring or modifying an existing alert. If you go to the configuration section on our space settings, you can choose a node on which you want to configure alerts, also for collectors, but focusing on the alerts for now. So you can choose a host where you want to configure the alert. It shows you the list of every single alert that has been configured. It also indicates to you on the icon whether it is a default alert from Netdata or is it something that you have configured, a custom alert. You can get into any of these alerts by clicking on the edit button, and once you go in there, it shows you the alert configuration. The right half of the screen is showing you the actual configuration that could be configured on a file, or it could be using the dynamic configuration. But on the left side, you basically have various parameters. These are forms that you need to be aware of when you're creating an alert. So this specific alert has been created on the system CPU context. It's applicable only for Linux hosts. So Netdata ships with various default host labels, and you could choose any of those to further filter where the alerts are applicable to. You can also choose specific chart labels. So in case you want to, for example, only look at the system CPU, or if you had a set of processes, if you wanted an alert to be only specific to a specific process, you can use the chart labels. But the most important section is the value section. So this is where you basically define when and how the alert should trigger. The value has two components. The first component is the database lookup. As you know, Netdata stores all of its metrics locally within its own database, time series database. So the first part is basically asking you to query the database for this context for a specific time period, and you can filter it on certain aspects. So in the example here, we want the average of the last 10 minutes of system CPU chart, and I want to specifically look at the IO weight dimension. So I want to know in the last 10 minutes what was the average IO weight, and this is what I'm querying. Now once you query this information, it's available in the $this variable, but then you can also have an additional formula on top of this database lookup to finally arrive at an alert definition. So in this case, we don't do anything on top of the DB engine. I have the average IO weight in the last 10 minutes. And what do I want to do for it to be triggered as a critical warning alert is in the next section, which is the triggers. So here in the triggers section, as you can see, this alert has only been configured as a warning alert. There is no definition for critical. So what this says here, if the average IO weight over the last 10 minutes is greater than 40. So it's using a ternary operator, so it might look a little bit complex. But what this basically says is if my average IO weight in the last 10 minutes is greater than 40%, trigger a warning alert. But if it goes below 40%, don't clear the alert until it reaches 20%. So this kind of helps with alert fatigue, especially if you have these values flapping around 40 and 45 and 35. You don't want a whole bunch of notifications that your teams receive. This is a good way of kind of setting some kind of a threshold before you want to clear these alerts. Now there are also a few actions that are available on the alert. So you can set if this alert needs to be triggered as a notification or should it be silent. So in this case, this is a silent alert. Even though it shows up on your dashboard on the alerts tab, it will not send a notification. So you can change this. You can simply remove the silent in there and it should work. You can also specify a delay. So you don't want to be alerting or notifying immediately when the alert condition triggers. So you can define when the alert goes from a clear to a warning condition. So basically the raising aspect, what should be the delay and what happens when it goes down. So if it is from a warning to a clear, what should be the delay before I start showing these changes for you within notifications. There's also a back off mechanism. So basically if this keeps flapping even with these delays, you want to have, for example, some kind of a multiplier associated with it. So in this case, it starts with 1800 seconds, and the next time within this 1800 seconds, if the alert still triggers, it will evaluate to a 2700 second delay before it actually sends it out. You also have an option for repeating the alert. So do you want to repeat this alert if it continues to be in a warning state or a critical state for a certain period of time. And all of these alerts can be, of course, submitted on the node that you selected, but also submitted to multiple nodes. If you click on the multi-node submit, it will give you a list of all the nodes that exist in your infrastructure, and then you can simply submit them all at once. So you don't need to create the same alert on every single host, but you can simply submit it. Of course, if you have Netdata parents configured using streaming, you would always create and manage alerts only on the parent agents. You would potentially disable alerts on all of your child agents. If you want to create a fully custom alert, you would click on the plus in there, select a configuration name, and select the context that you want to set this alert to. So it could be a system.context or a system.view, or in this case, a Postgres.connections. So you choose on which context you want to alert, and all of the other things that I mentioned in the past on how to select the values, how to define the triggers are exactly the same. So it should take potentially a minute or two to configure an alert and ship it to your entire infrastructure. I think that's about the alert configuration. The one other thing on the alert topic is if you go to the space settings, you have the alerts and notification section. This can be used to configure your notification methods. Netdata comes with a host of notification integrations from PagerDuty to MS Teams to Ops Genie to Slack, you name it. We also have a generic webhook integration. So if you have an incident management system in place, you can simply configure Netdata to ship alert notifications to your integration of choice. If you go back to the alert and notification settings, we also have the silencing rules. So if you wanted to apply silencing for a maintenance window or to a set of hosts or to a room or to a specific alert, all of that can be done in here. It's very simple. You click on add rule, and once you click on add rule, it asks you for a rule name, whether this silencing is applicable to all the users or just the user himself. Is it specific to a host or all hosts? You can also use the host labels. You can specify an alert name, but if you didn't, it would apply to all the alerts on that host. You can also specify the notification method. So if this silencing rule is for emails or for your Slack or anything else, so it will show you the list of all configured integrations. You can also schedule silences. So if you knew that second week of every month on a Monday from 11 p.m. to midnight, you have a maintenance window, you can schedule a silencing rule and also create a custom scheduling rule. So all of these options are possible with silencing. And the last option that you have in there is reachability settings. So every time when a Netdata agent fails to connect to Netdata Cloud, or the cloud is unable to connect to a Netdata agent, it raises what we call a reachability notification. It's slightly different to an alert. The alert is always triggered at the agent, but the reachability notifications are evaluated and triggered at Netdata Cloud or your Netdata Cloud on-prem. So in here, you basically define how long do you want to wait before Netdata sends you a notification about a host or a Netdata agent being offline or unreachable. You can specify this rule at the entire space or the account level, but you can also do this per room. So you may have a room that's located in a remote data center, maybe with sluggish network connectivity, and you can have a higher threshold on one of these rooms and a lower threshold on the other rooms. But you have all of this capability right in there. If you go to the notification methods, while creating a configuration, you can specify, for example, if we want to edit this machine learning integration that we've created. So if you click on the edit, it gives you an option to choose what notifications you want to be sent in there and to what rooms this is applicable. So you can say on this Slack integration, I only want the critical alerts to be sent, or just the reachable or just the unreachable. So you have full control over what notifications will be sent. So your teams are not bothered at the middle of the night. Yeah, this is, I think, everything that we had to cover about alerts and notifications.
Netdata's troubleshooting features. The main capabilities to troubleshoot issues faster are two features that Netdata offers. One is the anomaly detection and anomaly advisor, and the other thing is metrics correlation. So let's look at this chart here. You can see that the anomaly ribbon indicates that there was an anomaly in the user CPU during this time. There was an anomaly percentage of 16.67. So this is visible from the chart without you doing anything. Now let's say you wanted to dig down into this time frame further. What you would do is you would click on the highlight tool and just highlight this area. Make sure to get a bit of both sides of the time frame that you're interested in. And then you can click on the metrics correlation button here. So this will help you identify potential root causes for what triggered this. Because you have thousands of metrics, you don't have the time or inclination to go through all of those things. So what you're trying to do is finding other metrics that during the same time frame exhibited a behavior which could be thought of as correlated. So we're looking through all of the metrics. So in this case, you can see that we analyzed nearly 11,000 different charts and metrics, and we found 61 metrics that were correlated. So now the whole task of looking through these metrics to try and troubleshoot more optimally becomes much more simplified. So now you can just look at these charts which Netdata has identified to be correlated charts to understand if you can find any patterns here, if you can find the smoking gun to troubleshoot this issue better. So you can see when I get here, there's a big spike in the TCQoS chart. This might be related to what we saw with the CPU. One might be the factor of the other. It depends really on the specific scenario. So this is how you do metrics correlation. There are a few knobs that you can tweak here as well. If you want to see less correlated metrics, you can move the slider here, and it's going to show only metrics which are really correlated. If you want to increase it, you can move the slider to the right, and you'll see more metrics that are less closely correlated as well. You can choose what is a method of correlation that you want to use. There are two options. One is the volumetric method. The other is K8s, which stands for Kolmogorov-Smirnov method, which is a statistical method used for correlation. You can choose what kind of aggregation you want to do the correlations over, and whether you are doing the correlation over the actual metric value or the anomaly rate associated to the metric value. All of these options are on the table. And what methods work best for you would really depend on your workload. We've pre-selected the ones that work generally well across most environments. So you got a little sampling of both the anomaly rate as well as metrics correlation. There's more that you can do with the anomaly rate in Netdata. For example, there is this anomaly percentage button here. What this does is, let me close metrics correlation first so that we get all the metrics back. If I click on this, what it's doing is that it's looking at all of these sections in the table of contents, and now it's assigned or associated a value next to each of them. So this value indicates how anomalous each of these things are. So you can see that processors has a pretty high anomaly percentage of 57.5. And if you want to understand what this is about, you can click on processors and you can look inside it and see where that number is coming from. So there's different percentages associated to different sections. And under groups, you see that this is where the 57.5 is coming. So you dig down further and you look inside it, and you can see that disk section is where this is coming from. So when you look at this, you can see that here are all the anomalies within the disk metric. And there's quite a lot of different sections with the anomalies that are showing up. So this is a way to quickly just get a high level view of your entire infrastructure and understand where the anomalies are situated. So you can see here in this particular chart that there's a strong anomaly. So the purple and the anomaly ribbon is showing in a much more deeper shade. And then if you were looking to just maybe explore your infrastructure in the context of anomalies, we have this dedicated anomalies tab as well. It's called the anomalies advisor, and it always shows this chart of the anomaly rate across all of your different nodes in your infrastructure. So here you can see, just by looking at it, I can see that in general the anomaly percentage is pretty low, but there was this instance where one of my nodes, which is an EC2 instance on AWS, had a spike in the anomaly rate. It went all the way to 2.5%. Now, if I want to know what drove that, because I just know that it is this node, right? This particular EC2 node, I don't know what metrics inside the node drove that spike. So I would click on the highlighter tool again, and just like we did before, I would just highlight this area. And you can see that Netdata is now searching for anomalies during that period. And you can see here, these are the anomalies that are correlated to that time frame. And these are just the anomalous metrics. So now we're just looking at metrics that were behaving anomalously during that point in time. So you can see that there's Kubernetes related metrics. So there's clearly something odd that's going on here, which is behavior that hasn't been seen in a few days on that particular Kubernetes cluster, on that node, in this infrastructure. So this is again a way for you to really understand what exactly is going on in your infrastructure. If you're troubleshooting an issue, an outage, a slowdown, this is something that really helps you get to that needle in the haystack much faster, right? You could be saving hours or days of your time by using some of these features. So that's Anomalies Advisor. In In terms of the tabs, I finally want to talk about this tab called Events. Events tab can be thought of as an audit history feed or an events feed. Information such as alerts being triggered, nodes being connected and disconnected, new users being added, things like this would be reported here as an audit history feed, which is retained for many weeks and months so that you have an audit feed to go back to. You can download it, you can filter it by certain things. For example, if you want to just look at event feeds where new nodes became live across particular nodes, you can see that there was only one instance in the recent past in the last 10 minutes. But if I go back to last 7 days, for example, there's more instances of nodes becoming live, and I can export this into a CSV if I want to as well. So this was the Events tab. I think we've covered all of the tabs that are currently available. Just stepping into the settings for a moment. So we talked about a few of the things in the space settings. We talked about alerts and notifications. We talked about configurations, which is how you can configure alerts. We talked about this specifically, but you can also configure any collector from here. So let's say that you want to create a new Apache job. You would just click on this plus icon here and provide a name for this. So let's say Apache test, and then you would provide a URL for where your Apache server is running. If authentication needs to be provided, you can provide it here. Same goes for TLS proxy settings. And then once you do that, you can just submit, or you can submit across multiple nodes. That's it. So all the configuration required for enabling a new collector can be done directly from the UI using this tool. We call this the dynamic configuration tool because it allows you to dynamically configure settings for collectors, for alerts, and so on. So far we've covered the alerts and the configurations. What are the other settings that are available here? So info is just information about your Netdata space. You can think of the space as your account where you can have all of your different rooms which contain nodes so that you can organize your infrastructure properly, and you can assign access to different people, different levels of access to these different rooms. So you have a name, you can edit this if you want to. You have a slug which shows up in the URL. You have a description so that other users understand what the space is about. You have a space ID. This talks about what my role in the space is and what plan you have subscribed to in the space. So this is one of our demo spaces, and we've created rooms based on the applications that are running on the nodes. Really, this is completely up to you. So you can create rooms based on whatever organization that you prefer. It could be based on the team who is managing those nodes. It could be based on the workload. It could be based on where geographically the nodes are located. So there's a lot of different options. You can create any number of new rooms. There are no limits to this. You can add nodes to any number of rooms as you wish, and you can have any number of users on these rooms as well. The next section is nodes. So this is all of the nodes that have been connected in this space. You can see their current status, what version of Netdata agent that they're running, the membership rules. You can remove offline nodes if you wish to. And then you have user management. So these are all of the different users who are part of the space. I can change the role as an admin. I can change the role of user. I can remove a user. If you want to invite a user, you can invite them by entering their email, choosing what rooms they have access to. By default, they have access to all the rooms. And then you choose a role for the user that you're at. And you have different roles here: admin, manager, troubleshooter, observer, and billing. Once you do this, the users would receive an email. When they click on it, they would be able to join. And then in terms of authentication and authorization, there are certain options here. So if you want to configure enterprise single sign-on, you can use Okta to do this. There is an OpenID Connect or OIDC connector that you can use as well. And for identity management, there is support for SCIM. So all of these things exist here. You can use these if you wish to, or the standard means by which you can log in and authenticate yourself are either email, which works with a magic link, or a single sign-on using Google or GitHub. So that's user management. There is a plan and billing section which talks about what plan you're on, how many nodes you're currently using, and you can change your committed node count if you want to increase it, decrease it, depending on your wish. And then finally, you have the integration section. So the integration section is an easy way to understand what can Netdata do. So where can you deploy Netdata? All kinds of different operating systems here. You can also deploy it on Docker, Kubernetes. And if you want to understand, for example, how do you deploy Netdata on Kubernetes, you just click on this, it gives you, here's the Helm command that you would need to do if this was a new cluster, if this was an existing cluster. So it's just a couple of clicks and you have the information available. So this is in terms of deployment, but in terms of data collection, you can see all of the 800 integrations here of where Netdata can collect information from. And let's say you want to dig a bit deeper into this. Let me click on Apache, for example. It gives you an overview of what this Netdata collector does. It gives you a list of all the metrics under the metrics tab that will show up. What are the units? What are the dimensions? What are the metrics called? What are their context names? Are there any alerts? In this case, there aren't any pre-configured alerts, but if you were to go to another, let's say Postgres, for example, and look at the alerts, I can see that there's a whole bunch of different alerts that Netdata comes with out of the box. Things like average total connection utilization, percentage towards transaction ID wraparound. All of these alerts are built into Netdata. So if you were using Postgres and monitoring it using Netdata, you wouldn't even need to create custom alerts for these. Of course, you can customize the alerts if you wish to, but they exist out of the box. Setup section talks about any additional configuration that you might need. For example, creating a Netdata user inside your Postgres so that it has access to monitor certain things. You would find all those steps here. And if at all there are any issues monitoring, troubleshooting section will talk about how do you collect logs or how do you enter debug mode to understand more. And then there's a button here which allows you to jump into the configuration section for Postgres directly from here. So this was Postgres, but you can see there's all kinds of different collectors. We've also this handy grouping here. So if you're interested in something specifically, you can just see that on its own. And you can also see here that this is on the bottom right of each integration we mentioned, whether this is a collector that's natively created and supported and maintained by Netdata or if it's by the community. In both cases, they work just fine, but the Netdata collectors are the ones that Netdata is in charge of in terms of adding new alerts and so on. And something that's marked as community, for example, might be an open source maintained by the community collector. It might be a Prometheus exporter that works natively with Netdata. And if you want to know more about it, you can still use the same technique. You can go inside, read about it, you can configure it, you can do all of those things. So there's a whole bunch of hundreds of these integrations for different kinds of applications, databases, services, and so on. If you want to know about logs, like we mentioned, on Linux-based systems, there's systemd journal logs, and on Windows, we support Windows event logs. Now, this means that you could have application logs, you could have service logs, all kinds of different logs. As long as they're being forwarded to one of these log management solutions, Netdata will be able to visualize them. And we plan on adding support for more in the future. And similarly, it talks about, information in terms of overview, setup, and so on, if you want to figure it out. So with this integrations section, we've tried to build in a lot of the documentation into the tool so that you don't have to keep going out for reading the documentation. These are the different exporters. So if you want to export data from Netdata into an external time series database or in any format that you wish to, you should be able to do that as well. And then we have the notifications, which Satya covered earlier. If you want to send alert notifications from Netdata to Teams, PagerDuty, OpsGenie, to Netdata's own mobile application, email, Telegram, and the webhook, which allows you to do this in a more generic fashion, all of those are available as well. And authentication are the things that we covered earlier in terms of SSO and SCIM. So I think that covers all of the settings. There are just a couple more things to cover. So we've done this entire demo in dark mode, which is what most of our users prefer, but you can change it. You can change the theme here to light mode, for example. And then if that's what you prefer, there's some other settings here as well. Charts design, whether it should be default or a more minimal view, which dimensions to show. By default, Netdata shows non-zero dimensions, but you can choose to show all the dimensions. This is my profile. This is my personal notification settings. So I can decide that, even though this space has notifications enabled, I would not like to be woken up by notifications that happen in a demo room. So I can turn it off. I have my API tokens here to connect to the Netdata API. And there's this quick shortcut here if I want to just turn off the notifications quickly. Let's say there's a maintenance window happening and I don't want to get flooded with alert notifications.
The various shortcuts that are available. So if you expand the space menu, you don't need to go into the space settings necessarily to create a new room or to connect a new node or to invite users to your space. space or to specific rooms. All of these are available. So if you want to connect a node, just click on connect a node and you will be able to get the command to install Netdata. If you want to create a new room, just click on the plus next to the rooms and this will allow you to create a room. And after you create a room, you can choose what nodes you basically want to add to the rooms. So if you go to the new room that was created in there, it will give you a list of all the nodes that you can add into the room. If you want to invite users, you simply click on invite users, provide their email ID, select their role, choose the rooms that you want them to be added to, and that's about it. They should receive an email and a link to join your space. So all of these shortcuts are available right on the screen, so you won't need to go back and forth between the settings screen and your main screen.
You also have on this tab few handy shortcuts to things like the integrations tab that we talked about earlier. You can see all the rooms that are active right now, and these traffic signal lights next to each room indicate if there are any active alerts on them. So the red indicates there's a critical alert on the DNS query room. I can just go here quickly and see what that alert is about. I can see that it's an HTTP check failure for this particular URL. That's an easy way to kind of catch your eye on what's happening in your infrastructure.